to my informal emailing. But to me, that's they're different things.
Cheers, Ngamihi. I think yours sincerely is bordering on hostile.
It has a stuffiness to it. I agree, Wallace.
Yeah, and the other one I do is Happy Days, Rory.
Happy Days and Coolio, I'm not sure. We're good friends, Wallace, but that would be a bit odd if I received that from you, Meg.
Yeah, I don't send Coolio to my invoices to Radio New Zealand, for example.
All right, so what do we take out of this, Rory? Just get the tone right.
Get the tone right. It's all about the context that you're writing in. Okay, if you want to write to a High Court judge to get out of that parking ticket, yours sincerely might go quite far.
Coolio, bro.
Wallace, could I just come in on the passive aggressive stuff?
Yeah.
If I was being passive aggressive, I think I'd probably say something like "can oath."
Even though that's kind of colloquially friendly, I think. If you say
Is
that.
it?
Yeah, Ken Oath. Yeah, it's like, good on you, mate.
Got it. Yeah.
All right.
I
stand corrected.
All right, Rory, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Likewise.
Ngā mihi.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah,
Cheers.
Yeah.
Kind regards.
Happy days, everyone.
Yeah.
Wonderful panel. Thank you very much.
Kia ora.
Penny Ashton,
Kia ora.
Ian Powell. I'm Wallace Chapman. Back tomorrow, 3:45. It is Power. Bella Friday afternoon. You're going to love it. And Lisa Owen in Checkpoint is next.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Yeah, Heidi Akine, in the heat of the moment, Chris and Christopher made some big unplanned political promises. The morning after the night before, are they trying to cut and run? We talked to the chair of Bowel Cancer New Zealand about keeping commitments. Are groceries the future for the warehouse group after a torpedo sinks its profits? And the bust up over a breakfast cereal. The boss is live. It could be another 10 days with poo being pumped into the Hauraki Gulf with a rush on to patch a broken sewer. The Wairoa residents getting their building qualifications, patching up flood-damaged houses, and the stink over Auckland's little green food scraps bins. You can watch us live on the RNZ website and Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Ahi good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. The ACT Party leader says his potential coalition partner shouldn't be making election promises to lower the age for bowel cancer screening. In last night's News Hub leaders debate, both the National and Labour Party leaders promised to bring the age down. David Seymour says the state of the economy means it's not the time for political parties to be throwing around spending promises. He says funding cancer services always comes with critical trade-offs.
How many people can we detect for the number of screenings we'll have to do? How much will that cost? And would we be better, for example, to fund more cancer drugs? I think those are very difficult and harrowing trade-offs that a government has to make. Probably shouldn't fire them out in the course of a debate.
David Seymour believes cancer screening is essential, but the next government needs to be in saving mode. The Auckland Mayor says the sinkhole pumping sewage into the Waitemata Harbour is a result of many years of neglect. It will take 10 days to fix a 13-metre deep sinkhole that opened up in Parnell yesterday in one of Auckland's main sewer lines. It's the third sinkhole in the city in recent months. Wayne Brown says the pipeline network in Auckland needs to be brought into the 21st century.
The pipe that failed was older than my grandfather and really should have been recommissioned years ago. It's just another one of the financial risks of running a city that's got old infrastructure and meddling government.
Wayne Brown says the council wants more financial autonomy to be able to upgrade the pipeline network. Meanwhile, a restaurant owner in Eastbourne and Lower Hutt says he won't be able to open the doors this evening due to a water outage. The entire suburb is without water while Wellington Water fixes a burst pipe on Marine Drive. ESSC Eats restaurant owner Mark Nicholas says he can't open due to hygiene issues, but he's not too concerned about the loss of income.
These things I feel do happen here and there, and just as we can't open and operate tonight, there'll be something else that happens that we're twice as busy another night, I guess. So it is what it is. I guess then I'll just enjoy having the night not to work, which will be the benefit of the whole thing.
Wellington Water says taps should be running again at about 7 o'clock this evening. In Motueka, people are being advised not to take shellfish or whitebait near the town's wastewater plant. Tasman District Council says the final membranes in the filtration system are degraded and not working as expected. It's reverted to using an older system whereby partially treated wastewater is pumped into a soakage area and filtered through the ground. The US says it will work with allies to put together an international monitoring team for Nagorno-Karabakh after Azerbaijan's military takeover last week. Close to half of the population, more than 50,000 people, have fled, saying they fear persecution and ethnic cleansing. Azerbaijan has promised to respect the rights of the ethnic Armenian population in the territory. Owners of Category 2 properties damaged by floods say insurers are making it difficult for them to recover. Auckland Council today heard from people with Category 2 properties which need upgrades or repairs. Piha resident Nina Mardell says some insurance providers, such as IAG, are refusing to reinsure damaged homes. She says the lack of insurance will make it harder to apply for loans, putting homeowners in a difficult position. Ms Mardell says the payouts from the Earthquake Commission are also too small to pay for meaningful repairs. And roads around Parliament are reopening after today's anti-government protest. Police estimate about 2,000 people marched through central Wellington in a protest organised by Brian Tamaki's Freedoms and Rights Coalition. About 100 officers kept an eye on the crowd, but police say there were no problems and no arrests. But they say they'll remain at Parliament overnight while the protesters leave the capital. In sports news, All Blacks coach Ian Foster insists history counts for nothing come Saturday morning's must-win World Cup clash with Italy in Lyon. Foster has welcomed back the injured quartet of Sam Cane, Tyrell Lomax, Shannon Frizzell and Geordie Barrett, with the latter pair set to start. Italy's never beaten the All Blacks, but Foster says both teams' recent performances suggest it will be a close game with a quarterfinals berth on the line.
Well, history means nothing. We've seen them, leading France into the last 10 minutes of a Six Nations game. We've seen them pushing Ireland right to the end. So if you look at through their recent form, they're playing well. And that's the Italy that we expect to turn up.
Veteran lock Sam Whitelock has been named in the reserves and is set to break Richie McCaw's record as the most capped All Black with 149 tests. The White Ferns will need a much improved batting effort if they're to level their one-day series against South Africa tonight in Pietermaritzburg. The top 5 batters contributed just 45 runs in the opening 4-wicket loss. New Zealand cyclist Nicole Murray has been named the world's top female summer para-athlete by the International Paralympic Committee. Newcastle's beaten Manchester City 1-0 in the third round of the Football League Cup and will meet holders Manchester United in the last 16. And in golf, Taranaki's Ethan Jones has shot a round of 59 at the Tauranga Open to become just the third player to break 60 on the Charles Tour. That's the news.
Protesters descend on Wellington.
We just need change and we are asking for the chance for our voices to be heard. We're not heard anywhere else.
Labour and National battle over finance.
Under National, you will get significant cuts to public services.
Not true. Don't say it.
You couldn't quite make it through.
And the Warriors win big at the Dally M Awards.
That's to recognise the complete 180 turn in perception that the Warriors have had in just a year's time.
In a league of our own. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. From Northland to Taumadu Nui, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo, showers with thunderstorms possible this afternoon, becoming isolated overnight. But rain for Taupo and Waitomo tomorrow evening. Taranaki, Whanganui, Taihape and Manawatu, a few showers turning to rain tomorrow evening. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers with thunderstorms possible possible this afternoon, then becoming fine tomorrow morning. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Wairoa. Cloudy periods and isolated showers. Rain tonight. Clearing early tomorrow, but showers returning north of Wellington City tomorrow afternoon. Marlborough and Canterbury, a period of rain spreading north late this afternoon and evening, possibly heavy. High cloud tomorrow with a few evening showers in Canterbury. For the remainder of the South Island, scattered showers. Some heavy with hail tomorrow and snow lowering to 500 metres in Southland tomorrow night. Chatham Islands, rain easing tomorrow. It is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have traffic news and headlines for you at 20 past 5.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai, haere mai, ki checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The two main parties have been quick to hose down expectations after their leaders made a swag of promises in last night's leaders' debate. Chris Hipkins and Christopher Luxon both promised they would lower the age for free bowel cancer screening if elected. At the moment, there is universal free screening for people aged 60 to 74 years old. The commitment to lower that has not been part of either party's policy manifesto until now, and their respective finance spokespeople have been adding some cautious caveats around the pledge. Jemima Houston reports.
This is a policy on the hoof.
Will either of you lower the age of screening?
Yeah, I'd like to do that.
Do you want to bring it down as well, Chris Hickmans?
Yes, absolutely, I do.
Lowering the age for bowel cancer screening was one of several hasty new commitments made by Christopher Luxon and Chris Hipkins at last night's debate. But do either party have the budget to pay for it? Enter their finance spokespeople on Morning Report today. Labour's Grant Robertson indicated the screening age would have to be lowered in stages.
The likes of myself or Nicola, if she got the chance to do it, then have to work to see how quickly we can expand it. You'd never do it all at once.
He says Labour has set aside $2.7 billion in funding to meet increasing cost pressures, and that includes health services. National has promised to announce its fiscal plan tomorrow, but finance spokesperson Nicola Willis agreed changing the screening age would likely have to be phased in.
We are going to make sure we've got good buffers in our fiscal plan for the cost pressures and to allow for new initiatives in the future that we may not have anticipated yet that will become pressing needs.
Nicola Willis says to implement the promise, National would have to consider additional treatment and drug costs, as well as workforce shortages.
So not in your first 4 years?
Well, we would want to examine that initially to look at what all of those implications were before we then funded anything in a future budget.
If National makes it into government, they'll have ACT alongside them. Its leader David Seymour says the state of the economy means it is not the time to be throwing around spending promises.
We need to spend more on teachers and prisons and GPs and defence. But outside of that, the next government is going to have to be saving money.
Mr Seymour says funding cancer services always comes with a trade-off between the cost of increasing screening or funding more drugs.
I think those are very difficult and harrowing trade-offs that a government has to make. Probably shouldn't fire them out in the course of a debate.
Today, both leaders reconfirmed their commitment to lowering the bowel cancer screening age.
I've absolutely committed to lowering the age.
But actually it's the right thing to do, and so you'll actually see us do that.
Last night they also committed to getting 20,000 kids out of poverty by 2028. Auckland Action Against Poverty's Brooke Stanley Powell says targets don't relieve poverty for all children.
If you want to make a target, you want to talk big, then your target should be that no children should live in poverty in New Zealand.
Another promise is making pay equal for nurses working in hospitals, but the nurses' organisations and Daniels wants a time frame.
You know, you can promise anything, but if you don't put a timeline around it and put a stake in the ground, it is pretty meaningless.
Meanwhile, Vape Free Kids' Tammy Downer is pleased both leaders agreed to limit the number of vape stores, but wants to see more done.
Bringing in support for the children and families that are dealing with addiction today, you know, education to undo the perception that vaping's a safe alternative.
These are just a few of the promises made last night, and voters will have to just wait and see whether the winning party will follow through.
Well, joining us now is Bowel Cancer New Zealand Chair Stephen Corbett. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
What do you think you were promised last night by both leaders?
What I heard last night from both leaders was a commitment to match the bowel screening age in Australia, which starts from 45, which is obviously great news.
So anything short of that from either of those parties would be reneging on a promise, in your view?
Well, look, what we heard was 45. They agreed to match Australia. I think the fact that both the leaders immediately agreed with that recognises the severe impact that bowel cancer is having in New Zealand, the impact that it's having on New Zealand communities.
How long would you think would be a realistic period of time to roll that out?
Well, we wouldn't wait. At the moment, we've got 3,000 people diagnosed every year. 1,200 people die every year. That's triple the amount of people that die on New Zealand roads. It's one of the highest incidences of bowel cancer in the world. And frankly, it's shameful. And so we would want to see that either party move immediately on that promise.
So first term is what your expectation is?
Absolutely. I mean,
because neither party, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but neither party has given a firm commitment to any sort of timeline.
Well, we would like to see a work plan and funding behind that work plan to make sure that this is implemented promptly. This is a real problem for New Zealand, and it's not necessary. 90% of bowel cancers are curable if they're caught early. We're losing over 1,200 people a year, and we don't need to be doing that.
What difference would it make to start screening at 45, do you think?
It would make an enormous difference. One of the disturbing trends in bowel cancer is that young people are getting it more often. So 350 people in New Zealand who are under 50 are diagnosed every year. 350 people under 50, and that number is increasing year on year. It's a global trend, and it's something that we really need to pay attention to. People don't realise, I think, that it's the second highest, bowel cancer is the second highest cause of cancer in New Zealand, and it kills more people than prostate cancer and breast cancer combined. And I think people need to, the government needs to do more to make people aware of that, and they need to act on this promise immediately.
Both finance spokespeople for both of the parties have said it would need to be rolled out over time. They couldn't just go straight to 45 years, and National in particular has said there are workforce constraints. Is that a fair point?
Look, we don't want to see any backpedalling here on a promise that's been made across the aisles. We have waited a long time for the national bowel screening program to come into play across the country. It's taken too long. Now we're waiting for the implementation of bowel screening for Māori and Pacific from age 50. Māori and Pacific peoples are suffering disproportionately from the effect of bowel cancer. That's also taking too long. We don't want this to take long as well. We'd like to see them act on this promptly in their first term.
So, Stefan, if there is no action on this in the first time, and if they don't lower right down to 45 years old for the commencement of screening, how will you regard that?
Well, it's just senseless loss of life, isn't it? If we're unsure of the environmental factors that are causing bowel cancer, in the absence of really specific information, screening is the best way to save Kiwi lives. And by not acting, you're just reconfirming the misery and the impact that this is having in Aotearoa New Zealand. And that doesn't need to happen.
Are you nervous at all that you might have been used to gain some political capital?
No, I think that there's genuine commitment to this. I think people are waking up, and politicians are waking up to the impact that bowel cancer is having in New Zealand. It's one of the worst incidences in the world. It's the second highest cause of cancer after lung cancer. But up until now, people haven't really appreciated that. I think this is now becoming better known in political circles, and I think there's a real willingness to act.
Thank you for your time. That is Bowel Cancer New Zealand Chair Stefan Corbett there. 16 minutes after 5. Kia mau tōne mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Auckland's mayor says the sinkhole pumping sewage into Waitemata Harbour is a consequence of a city with old infrastructure. It's expected to be 10 days before crews can stop the flow from the century-old sewer line around which a 13-metre tomo has emerged. Residents are being warned not to swim at any inner-city beaches due to the high health risk. It's the third sinkhole in the city in recent months to cause major disruptions to residents and businesses. Haisa Almeida has more.
Ngāti Whatua Orake placed a rahui on the Waitemata Harbour this morning in response to the significant environmental contamination caused by the sinkhole. The Iwi Trust Chair Marama Royal says the incident has been traumatising.
Back in the 1940s and 50s, the sewage pipes actually came out into Okahu Bay, and our village, was down there. You know, it killed all of our kaimoana. To hear that this is going to happen again, it just brings back all of those really sad memories.
Water Care says it will take 10 days to create a bypass around the affected area of the pipe, but a permanent fix could be months away. Despite initial success clearing soil and debris from the pipe yesterday morning, by daylight the sewer was blocked again. Watercare Chief of Operations Mark Bourne says the blockage brought large volumes of untreated wastewater straight into the Waitemata.
The initial damage where the tomo was first located didn't actually block the sewer, so our efforts there were protecting the sewer. And when we left the site yesterday in the very early hours, we were confident that the sewer was running clear. Unfortunately, there was a further collapse, and that collapse is what caused the blockage.
He says the blockage is unprecedented.
In my 35 years of working in the water and wastewater industry, I've never seen a blockage like this before. The nature of this failure is very similar to other failures that we've seen, which were a direct result of flooding and storm events that have happened throughout this year.
In Parnell, people on the street say the number of sinkholes popping up is alarming.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. I stay Point Chev, and I saw that they've banned swimming at the beach, and I had to keep the dog away from the beach for a couple of days as well because of that. But it's kind of concerning. You just never know what it's going to happen to you.
A bit concerning. I know there's been some problems with the sewage system over where I live in Parnell. Yeah, no, that's not good, is it? A bit of a pattern.
Parnell Business Association General Manager Cheryl Adamson says businesses have had enough.
Since the January floods, we've been extremely frustrated trying to deal with the silos that exist in water care and healthy waters and Waka Katahi, and it's extremely hard for business to navigate between these silos to get a resolution. So in general, we are, yes, very concerned about the ageing infrastructure in our suburbs.
James Stapp works up the road from the sinkhole. He believes it's not enough just to address faults as they arise.
I would hope that they do also have a plan that's a bit more proactive in making sure that where there are weak points, they're being reinforced. It's weighing that up with the fact that people don't like roadworks and things getting in the way of getting around the city. But if that means that sinkholes are not popping up, then that's probably a good thing.
Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown says Auckland's sewage network needs to be brought into the 21st century.
The pipe that failed was older than my grandfather and really should have been recommissioned years ago. It's just another one of the financial risks of running a city that's got old infrastructure and meddling government.
He says the issues with sinkholes are a result of years of neglect.
It takes years to replace years of neglect. This city is an old city by New Zealand standards, and a lot of the old stuff that was being known about for many years and several decades, and it's only slowly being started to address now.
Watercare says an investigation would be carried out to establish the causes of the sewage blockage.
It is 5:20 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai or Whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Let us know your thoughts on lowering the bowel screening age to 45 and holding politicians to their promises, even if they are made in the heat of the moment. Also interested in your views if you're in Auckland or use the beaches in Auckland another 10 days where there's going to be human waste going into the water because of a very old pipe. 2101 on text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Evie is here with the headline headlines. Ko iwi anō tēnei.
Labour and Nationals finance chiefs have been clarifying their leaders' promises to lower the age for free bowel cancer screening if elected. It's currently free for those aged 60 to 74, but in last night's News Hub leaders debate, both Chris Hipkins and Christopher Luxon pledged to bring it down to 50 or 45 for some at-risk people. Today, both parties said such a change would be phased in. Bowel Cancer New Zealand Chair Stefan Corbett told Checkpoint the leaders' pledge to match the screening age to that in Australia was great news, but Mr Corbett thought the parties should move immediately, saying 3,000 people are diagnosed here each year with around 1,200 deaths. Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown wants the council to have more autonomy to deal with the underground pipe network after a sewer collapsed, pumping waste into the Waitemata harbour. It will take 10 days to build a bypass line around the blockage caused by the 13-metre deep sinkhole that opened up in Parnell yesterday over a main sewer line. Mayor Brown says the failed pipe is older than his grandfather. Roads around Parliament are returning to normal after 2,000 people marched through Wellington in a protest organised by Brian Tamaki's Freedom and Rights Coalition. Police say there were no problems and no arrests, but they'll remain at Parliament overnight. And an armed man shot by police in Auckland yesterday afternoon faces a hospital bedside court hearing tomorrow. Police say they fired at the 29-year-old while he was brandishing a gun on the Lincoln Road overbridge. He's facing multiple charges, including aggravated robbery. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic around the country, State Highway 6, Haast Pass, is still under guided convoy at 8 a.m, midday and 4:30 p.m. each day because of that slip. A large slip at Motu Bluff, north of Te Kaha, has closed State Highway 35 between Hawaii and Omayo until further notice. And on Auckland's southern motorway between Ramarama and Bombay, a breakdown has been blocking the left lane heading south. Our next traffic news and headlines is at 20 to 6.
Kia ora rā e ho. The All Blacks have brought back 4 players from the injured list for this weekend's must-win match against Italy at the Rugby World Cup. Regular captain Sam Cane returns and will be on the bench with prop Tyrell Lomax, who's recovered from a bad gash in his leg. Geordie Barrett comes straight back into the number 12 jersey, and Shannon Frizzell returns to the blind side. Our rugby reporter Joe Porter joins us now. OK, Joe, is this the best possible team?
Well, yeah, it would seem to be the best possible team. They obviously haven't chosen Samasone Tokiaho at hooker. I still think he's their number one hooker. They've also picked Nepal Aulala and Ufatunga Fasi, somewhat forced to do that in the front row at prop because of Ethan de Groot's suspension. So I think the front row is not necessarily their strongest. I think those players are potentially on trial for playing in the team should they, of course, qualify for the quarterfinals. But everywhere else, this team looks like the strongest team they could have put out on the park. Obviously, barring Sam Cane coming back from injury on the bench, Dalton Papali'i won't be the starting open side flanker when he's back. So, yeah, the strongest team they could have put out on the park, which is obviously a big mark of respect to Italy and, of course, a mark of respect towards this being a must-win game for the All Blacks. They're under a lot of pressure after a disappointing performance against France and what was a big win over Namibia, but what probably didn't show fans or pundits whether or not they're a team that can still push deep into this tournament.
Yeah, OK, so on paper, the All Blacks should beat Italy, but, you know, if we've learnt anything from the last few weeks and years even, anything can happen. Ask Australia.
Yeah, that's right. Look, the bookies have absolutely written off, especially the New Zealand ones. The TAB have written off Italy. The All Blacks playing $1.01. Italy rank outsiders to win. They've never beaten the All Blacks, of course, before. History is on the All Blacks' side. I think in previous years, previous generations, most All Blacks fans would have been utterly convinced they were going to beat Italy this weekend. But there's an element of doubt creeping in, and that's simply because Italy have been playing very well. They were leading France until the last 10 minutes of their Six Nations clash this year. They pushed Ireland, who were the number one team in the world, all the way. It feels like on their day, Italy could tip up a team like the All Blacks. And if the All Blacks aren't on, if they get a red card, which we've seen plenty of already this tournament, yeah, the Azzurri could get up. So I think fans are a little bit concerned, despite the bookies feeling like the All Blacks are very heavy favourites.
So Sam Whitelock, he's bringing up a big milestone, but he's on the bench.
Yeah, Anne Foster said it doesn't take away from the romance of the occasion, whatever that means. But yeah, I think it's a little bit sad, isn't it, for Sam Whitelock he's breaking Richie McCaw's record, the great Richie McCaw, playing his 149th test this weekend to become the most capped All Black of all time. But he has to do it from the bench. So there's a little bit of, I guess, a possible blight on that record. But however, the team has to come first. They're at the World Cup. For whatever reason, Ian Foster thinks it's best to keep Sam Whitelock on the bench this weekend. He's still going to break Richie McCaw's record, and of course he'll play his 150th test before this World Cup is out, you would imagine, and possibly become the most capped All Black at a World Cup. So there's plenty more milestones to come for Sam Whitelock, that's for sure.
Thank you, Joe. That is our rugby reporter, Joe Porter. Returning to our earlier story, the no-swim warning for the Waitemata Harbour could be in place for up to 10 days because of human waste overflowing from a busted sewer pipe. About 3 tonnes of material was cleared out of the Parnell pipe last night, and Watercare is building an overland bypass to transfer waste around the blockage, but that will take days. Now, in the meantime, the harbour's taking a hit. Hauraki Golf Forum co-chairperson Nicola McDonald joins us now. Kia ora.
Kia ora, how are you today?
I'm good, but just when you thought it was safe and spring is coming and kids are off school, don't go near the water.
Yes, absolutely. Well, especially not at the moment.
And so what are your thoughts, your reaction to the fact that once again we've got these little black pins on our inner city beaches in Auckland?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think what it does highlight is ageing infrastructure, a lack of investment along with climate change, and it is a serious overflow. We're looking at millions of litres of wastewater going into the beautiful Waitemata Harbour. I guess for small mercies, we're not in the full thrust of summer, but it is coming. So we want to make sure that we get on top of this and stop the flow as quickly as possible.
Millions of litres of poo, basically, going into the sea. What does that do to the environment, to the kai, for people who want to gather seafood and things?
Well, there's a lot of damage immediately. That environmental damage, not only just in terms of kaimoana that may be there, but more importantly, it affects our seabirds. The Hauraki Gulf is the seabird capital of the world, so we need to look after our biodiversity. And notwithstanding that, ourselves, we love looking at our beautiful harbour and we don't want to see wastewater, and even just the thought of it makes me go, ugh. So, we've really got to get in behind Watercare and get this fixed.
But people are getting used to it, right? It seems like, okay, the beach, you can't swim there anymore. It happens so often. Does it concern you that it is becoming a common, regular occurrence?
It is a concern, and I think a city as large as ours, 1.7 million people, we really need to urge our local government to get in behind with better infrastructure, making sure that we can enjoy the ocean as we expect to enjoy it. All of these types of incidents are just not good enough. We're not a third world country, and we certainly shouldn't be treating our environment like that.
I suppose the thing is, though, Nicola, have ratepayers and politicians alike brought this on themselves because nobody wants to pay? So how do you fix stuff without the money?
Well, I guess that's one way that we could look at it. But, through Auckland Council, we have a number of targeted rates. The natural environment is one of those. We have a climate change rate. Let's divert some of that ratepayers' money directly into there. But at the same time, we have an affordable waters reform that's looking specifically at wastewater and stormwater. And if one thing tells us in our city, we absolutely need better investment here.
Thank you for joining us this evening. That is the Hauraki Golf Forum co-chair, which is Nicola McDonald there, talking about 10 days. They're going to say this notice for no swim notice will be in place while that waste is going out into the Waitemata Harbour. It is 5:30. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier, who joins me in the studio. Nona, business confidence has turned positive, you say. Who says?
Well, it's the ANZ's monthly, that's the ANZ Bank's monthly survey. And what they've got here is business confidence showing a net 2% of respondents are feeling more positive about the outlook than they have in a long time. We're talking, it's been since May 2021 since we had a positive reading. Last time we were looking at a negative 4%. That was in August. So it's an improvement.
Did they get asked why they're feeling more positive?
Yeah, well, they think that inflation is coming down. So maybe 5% instead of where we've been. That, even though that's the case, Sharon Zollner, who's the chief economist at the ANZ Bank, thinks that's not going to be enough to satisfy the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. And they are still penciling in a rate hike of 0.25% coming up in
next week.
November.
No, is it November?
Yep, okay. November. Sorry.
All right. So should we move on to the young people? Speaking of, rates rises and costs and all the rest of it. So young people are bearing the brunt of the cost of living crisis. Tell me more.
So the Financial Services Council were holding their conference this week, and they did a special paper on young people and how they're going. So it was young people and the cost of living crisis. Now, so people between the ages of 18 and 43. So
that's considered young people for the purposes of cost of living?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
There'll be a few people celebrating out there. Carry on.
Maybe in this room. So that would be the Gen Z and the millennials. But this group are asset poor primarily. Yeah. They've missed out. And so they're having a harder time with the cost of living crisis because they don't have any assets, for one thing. Most of them are struggling or can't even see the future for themselves with assets. And financial literacy is really one of the bigger issues. I guess if you don't own anything, it becomes more difficult to think in the sort of, hypothetical. So assets and understanding how investments work, all that sort of thing is really not there for these younger people, and it's important that they get that information. So the Financial Services Council are talking about how they can reach this group, how they can help increase and improve financial literacy. And the chief executive there said that he was heartened that the upcoming election, both of the two major parties are committed to improving financial literacy for younger people, but really it's for everyone.
Okay, let's take a spin around the markets,
Okay,
please.
So the top 50 index, it had really not a very good day. It fell nearly 1.25%. It was a 139-point drop to 11,178. That's not really surprising because we're seeing that in the major markets, the same story. And again, it's about interest rates staying higher for longer and the ongoing threat. Not just that. Oil prices also way up. Brent crude spot oil was this afternoon $98.35 US a barrel. That's a lot of money, and that's going to flow through to the pump, obviously. And of course, it has a negative effect on business costs. Dollar trading at 59.4 US cents, 93.3 Australian, and 48.9 British pence. And I can tell you, the pence went just over 49 a little earlier today.
But then slip back. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier there with business news. Continuing on with the business theme, the cost of living crisis is proving a double-edged sword for the warehouse group that is hemorrhaging profits despite record sales. The group, which includes Noel Leeming, Torpedo 7 and the Red Sheds, saw net profits plummet more than 65% compared to last year, even though it sold a record $3.4 billion of stuff. Weaker consumer confidence put people off big-ticket items. The warehouse grocery line was the standout performer, with sales increasing more than 25% as households hunt for a cheaper deal. Well, joining us now from the warehouse group is Chief Executive Nick Grayston. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Can you explain this a little more to us? Record sales, but a massively shrinking profit. I mean, where's the disparity?
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. So really it was a confluence of a number of things. Coming off a couple of record years of profit, we made the commitment to be able to spend more than double what we would normally spend on pushing through our transformation. So a lot of commitment to cost and expense. That came at a time where sort of October, our critical Christmas quarter, collapsed consumer confidence, and we took us some time to deleverage those costs. In addition, a bunch of margin pressures, everything from commodity prices through cost of shipping. A lot of shutdown of Chinese ports caused a very lumpy supply chain. That drove distribution costs up. And so really tough first half. We spent the rest of the year putting the business in a better position to be able to resist what we think is going to be an ongoing challenge to our customers. So tough year for us and tough year for a lot of our customers.
I notice in the material you released today regarding Torpedo 7, right, we sell recreational goods, there was a note about the weather being an issue. How so?
Well, so the confluence in the Southern Hemisphere of Christmas and summer. If you have bad weather in the summer, that's a double whammy, along with the collapse of consumer confidence.
Do you need to torpedo that chain? Because it looked like a millstone around your neck, operating loss of 22 million, really depressed sales. I mean, is the time up?
Well, thanks. That's a great pun. But we are committed to the business. At this stage, we have a turnaround plan in place. We have a lot of detail around that. But, the business has really got to prove that it can stand on its own 2 feet. A lot of the pain that we experienced this year was specifically from the bike business. It's been very buoyant throughout the COVID years and took a real hit. Everyone's got bikes. It's a global phenomenon. We've got to reduce the dependence on bikes and,
so
change the mix to sell other
Did you have bike stock, Nick, that you then could not shift?
We have got too much bike stock, and we've got other areas that also have too much stock, but bike is the biggest issue for sure.
So hundreds or thousands of them?
Oh, thousands of them.
That you can't move?
Well, not we can't move, but will require discounting to move. It's not just us, it's the whole bike market.
Groceries is interesting, right? Is this where it's going to be at for the warehouse group? Your sales up more than 25%, and it's almost 19% of your total sales. What do you want? What do you want it to be? Do you want to be a fully fledged supermarket chain in essence?
No, our strategy is not to become a fully fledged supermarket chain, but we are working hard on offering distressed Kiwi families affordable groceries. We're in the process of trialling fresh fruit and veggies. That's in 12 stores. We're growing our private label market kitchen range. And, particularly in pantry and chilled goods, we're up 92%. And so the biggest challenge for us is really the access to wholesale supply at fair prices. And, as you know, that's been very topical and we're struggling to get equitable access.
OK, let's talk about this. You have complained, the Warehouse Group has complained to the Commerce Commission about your Weet-Bix supplies. Tell us what's going on, please.
Yes, that's very concerning for us. We got a notification a couple of weeks ago from Sanitarium that they were going to stop supplying us with Weet-Bix come 30th of September, which is tomorrow. We've had Weet-Bix 1.2 kilogram family pack in the warehouse since 2001. It's a key breakfast staple and a key element of the Kiwi breakfast. We sell this item for $6 in our stores. It's $8.20 at Countdown and $9.29 in New World. And so, we're by far the cheapest. Pack and Save sometimes promote it and get down to our price, but that depends very much on where you live. We don't make much money on it, but this is really, really important for our customers. And so, there's only a small shortage in terms of Sanitarium's ability to supply. So we don't think cutting us off completely rather than rationing everyone is the right answer. We've asked them to reconsider on several occasions.
So, Nick, just so that listeners are clear on this, because this is important, you sell, as far as you can tell, the cheapest Weet-Bix, right? There is, Sanitarium says it has supply issues. So it's decided just to cut you off completely and continue to supply to the other two major chains.
Yeah, that's correct.
So people are going to have to pay at least $2 more for their Weet-Bix.
That's correct.
And why are they saying that they're only doing this to you?
Well, they're telling us that last in, first out. We weren't actually the last in, but we don't think that this is fair. We don't think it's fair on us. We don't think it's fair on Kiwi families that are already under pressure, which is why we've asked the Commerce Commission to investigate.
So what do you think is actually going on here? Will they get more from those other two chains?
Well, you'll have to draw your own conclusions on that, but we think it's very suspicious.
And for your consumers, it means what?
It means that hard-hit Kiwi families will have to pay more. They won't have the convenience of being able to buy it from the warehouse when they're in there. and they are going to have to pay more. But we're not going to stop fighting to keep essentials affordable for Kiwi families.
Thanks for your time, Nick. That is Nick Grayston, who is the Warehouse Group's chief executive there. It is 20 to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. That is interesting. The Warehouse Group says they've been cut off by Sanitarium, the supply of Weet-Bix. They sell it, they say, for a couple of bucks cheaper at least than the other supermarket chains. So they've made a formal complaint. 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Evie is here. Anea Evie, mena pita pita kōrero.
ACT Party leader David Seymour says the state of the economy means this is not the time for political parties to be throwing around spending promises. In last night's News Hub leaders debate, both the National and Labour leaders promised to bring down the age for bowel cancer screening. David Seymour says while cancer screening is essential, the next government needs to be in saving mode. The Auckland Mayor says the sinkhole pumping sewage into the Waitemata Harbour is a result of many years of neglect. Wayne Brown says the pipeline network in Auckland needs to be brought into the 21st century. He wants the council to have more financial autonomy to be able to upgrade the underground network. The Queenstown cryptosporidiosis outbreak has grown to 45 cases, with a further 17 probable cases. Health officials say some people are getting cryptosporidiosis from people they live or work with. They're urging hand washing and cleaning surfaces with a product that contains hydrogen peroxide. A boil water notice remains in place. And in Mexico, a mother was filmed holding her son as a black bear jumped on their picnic table and helped itself to their food. Santiago Macias has Down syndrome and is terrified of animals. It was also his birthday. Mum Sylvia is seen shielding his eyes until it wanders off. She says she's just a mother who protected her cub. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic. No update on Auckland's southern motorway between Ramarama and Bombay. A breakdown has been blocking the left lane heading south. If you have an update, let us know on 2101. That's the text. A large slip at Motu Bluff, north of Te Kaha, has closed State Highway 35 between Hawaii and Omaio until further notice. Residents can transit through for 1 hour 3 times a day after 8 a.m, midday and 5:30. So you've still got about 47 minutes to get through. And guided convoys are still operating through the Haast Pass, State Highway 6, at 8 a.m, midday and 4:30 p.m. each day because of a slip there. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Kia ora, Eho. Wellingtonians can breathe a sigh of relief after a protest involving hundreds of people mirroring last year's anti-mandate occupation remained peaceful. The protest, organised by Brian Tamaki's Freedom and Rights Coalition, rallied over a range of different views, including vaccines, co-governance and transgender rights. Our reporter Ashley McCall and cameraman Angus Drever were there.
We are here today to have a peaceful protest. This is a revolution for what we love in our country. And if you agree with that, why don't you make some noise?
Cheers from around 2,000 people who travelled all across the country to join the crowd. Their reasons for joining the protest were very mixed. Some were there to protest last year's vaccine mandates, co-governance, climate change and transgender rights. Children in attendance had pink balloons tied to their wrists and ushered to the front of the protest. Destiny Church and Freedom and Rights Coalition leader Brian Tamaki told media the protest was for people whose lives had been stolen by politicians.
They're all in crisis, by the way, the crime wave and the high cost of living. None of these politicians have come up with suitable answers. So you might be saying, well, what's your answer? Well, the answer is we need to get rid of all these people, these incompetent politicians, these politicians who don't know what they're doing.
Hands off our children!
Hands off our children!
Not on!
Our watch!
Not on!
Our watch!
Despite protesters being well behaved, their presence caused a massive headache to those passing by.
Oh, I'm really disappointed it does not feel like New Zealand. We don't need to have this in our country.
We've got a lot of freedoms. What more do they want? They should get back to work.
Slightly concerned if they start occupying Parliament again or...
Lambton Key jewellery store worker Pearl Bray says stores, including hers, will take a financial hit.
sales in our street will be going down incredibly. We work in retail. It's not good for the market that we have already, even. We're already struggling, and having this kind of stuff is just going to push us back even further.
Her colleague Annie Cook agrees.
The foot traffic is super important to us, and on a day like today we'll be very quiet. This will be kind of thing. When you're walking down the main street, you don't really want to have to deal with a lot of people yelling and screaming during your day.
Both of them are confused as to what the main message is from the protesters. Porneki anti-fascist coalition organiser Anne Campbell echoes that, describing their messages as confused and incoherent. Campbell says the group was made after last year's anti-mandate occupation, and they wanted to counter-protest the range of different views today.
The Freedom and Rights Coalition is cut from the same cloth, and we're just here to kind of make it clear that the far-right presence is not welcome in the city, that not everyone shares their conspiracist views, and just to kind of offer a kaupapa of peace.
As they marched onto Parliament's front lawn, there were 100 officers present, along with the return of concrete bollards. Meanwhile, on the front lawn, crowds remained enthusiastic as they sang the national anthem, while the protest turned into an election rally for Mr Tamaki's political party. Cheers also rang out for several candidates giving speeches.
Although this protest brings back memories to last year's anti-mandate protest, the difference here is that no tents have been erected on the front lawn, nor are there any cars surrounding Parliament.
Police described this protest as uneventful, but will remain at Parliament overnight while people leave the city.
It's 13 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. New Zealand-born TV presenter Dan Wootton has been suspended from GB News in the UK. It follows remarks made by actor Lawrence Fox on the broadcaster's show about a female journalist. The comments have been described as unacceptable, unjustifiable and indefensible. The BBC's David Silito reports.
But look, let's move on to the BBC, Lawrence, because they're once again...
Dan Wootton, GB News presenter, talking to actor and regular GB News contributor Lawrence Fox in a discussion about a debate that had taken place on the BBC featuring the journalist Ava Evans. Lawrence Fox was asked what he made of it.
We're past the watershed, so I can say this. Show me a single self-respecting man that would like to climb into bed with that woman, ever.
He then went on to repeat the comment, but in rather more blunt language, and this time with laughter from Dan Wootton.
Oh, Lawrence. Well, look,
Dan Wootton did apologise, but a few hours later, the channel had some breaking news of its own.
We begin this bulletin with some breaking news. I can tell you that GB News, this company, has suspended its presenter Dan Wootton.
Lawrence Fox has also been suspended, and Ava Evans has received a formal apology.
I honestly, not to cast doubt on our media landscape, but I didn't actually think anything was going to happen of it, especially not when I first saw the clip last night. I didn't think anything was going to come off of it. I don't want to say I'm pleased by it. I just think that that's probably the best outcome I could have hoped for.
Well, Chancellor, thank you for...
It is, of course, not the first time the channel's run into trouble. This, one of 3 breaches of TV rules about impartiality and politicians presenting news.
You're watching GB News.
And on tonight's Dan Wootton show, it was Mark Dolan. Lawrence Fox may be unrepentant, but for GB News, this has crossed a line.
We have freedom of speech, but not freedom from the fallout.
Alrighty, time for some of your feedback now. A lot of you getting in touch about Auckland's sinkhole and the no swim notice in Waitemata Harbour as a result of human waste overflowing out there. Gary says the problems with the infrastructure is that it is not built for today's population and a lack of maintenance. Another listener has said in Te Atatu Peninsula we have the same every time it rains for years due to infill housing and rampant development. Jill's got in touch to say, seriously, are we really a first world country? What a shocking indictment on councils and governments who fail to plan with an eye on simply maintaining power. Do keep your feedback coming, 2101 on text, or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. A group of Wairoa residents is earning their building qualifications by repairing flood-damaged homes. After homes north of the river were inundated by metre-high flooding during the storm, locals looking for work found it in the rebuild. Now their tutor is helping them earn qualifications on the job, opening up the prospect of work beyond the recovery. Kate Green has the story.
Casey Aranui's crew is hard at work stripping wallpaper and jib from the walls of a flood-damaged home on Ruataniwha Road.
This is one of the flood-impacted homes. The owner of this home, she is uninsured.
They'll put in insulation, replace the jib and then plaster, leaving the home warmer and drier even than before the storm. Casey Aranui travels up from Napier every couple of weeks to supervise the crew. The 12 men and women, a range of ages and experience, originally worked in silt removal, but there's no shortage of need for housing repairs. Under Casey Aranui's supervision, 3 homes are due to be finished by the end of the week, with materials bought and donated by the council and the Ministry of Social Development. But when the work's finished, she wants her crew to find full-time jobs.
I started writing a reference letter for these guys to explain the sort of work and the mahi they did, to give them something to show for what we've done with these houses. And because I'm actually a tutor at Te Pūkenga as well, I was talking to some of them and they're like, oh, what about BCAT? So I looked into it and I jumped in with BCITO and he helped me create something.
Now they'll have unit standards to their names.
I would hire these guys in a heartbeat. Like I met them for the first time, like maybe 7 weeks ago, and they were all them, but they're like real diamonds in the rough. Like I wish I could take them back home and give them employment.
Trainee Seth Walker is 19 and he's found his niche.
I enjoy seeing the homeowners happy, you make them happy.
What's their reaction normally? Do you get to come back and see it finished and see them?
Yeah, they're mostly all my older family, so yeah, they just up brownie puts for later on, I suppose.
Dozens of homes are already contracted to be built across Wairoa.
That's what we're going to try and move into after we clean up all the houses. We're going to try and move inside and start getting us some building jobs.
Chief Executive for the Wairoa Young Achievers Trust and Deputy Mayor Denise Eagleson-Karikare says the mayoral task force for jobs funded the students to sit assessments in health and safety, first aid and working at heights. She says it's in the best interests of the town to get them trained up.
We are short of labour, and so we're trying to train our own who are going to stay here for the long haul to actually be part of everything.
And with the recovery expected to take 2 to 5 years, there'll be plenty of work to go around.
Intense backroom negotiations have seen the return of a US soldier who'd fled to North Korea. Travis King is now back in US custody after diplomatic interventions from both Sweden and China. Private King ran off into North Korea during an organised tour of the demilitarised zone. The BBC's Jean McKenzie reports.
The US soldier had been in trouble with the South Korean authorities and was being sent home to be disciplined by the army. The North Koreans have kept his whereabouts a total secret. But behind the scenes, an extraordinary operation has been unfolding. Sweden played chief negotiator, acting on behalf of the US. They went into North Korea to get Private King and took him across the border to China, where a US team was waiting to fly him home. There is a slither of geopolitical hope in all this, that despite current military tensions between North Korea and the United States, both sides were able to arrange Travis King's safe return, and with help from China. A US official said this showed the importance of keeping channels of communication open, while adding they'd made no concessions to the North to make this happen. Private King is said to be in good health and good spirits, excited to be heading home. Any disciplining will wait, the US says, until his medical and emotional needs have been met and he's been reunited with his family.
Small green bins have been popping up around Auckland as the council's scheme to recycle leftover food scraps kicks into action. Residents in West, North and Central Auckland have now got their bins, with the full rollout to be completed by the end of October. But not everyone is thrilled about the new scheme. Reporter Luca Foreman and camera operator Nick Monroe have more.
It's an unlikely commodity, but Auckland Council says the food scraps you traditionally scrape into the rubbish bin are actually a valuable resource. Most Aucklanders now have their little green food recycling bins, which have another smaller container inside that can be kept in the house. It's Glenn Marshall's job to pick the bins up. He says the amount of people using the service varies from place to place.
Like some streets you'll get like 80% of the bins out, other streets you'll only get 20%. But I'm finding it's slowly creeping up, and that's sort of consistent with what I'm hearing through the council, is like it's slowly getting up there.
Once the food scraps are collected, they're used to make biogas and fertiliser for greenhouses. Mr. Marshall says people are still figuring out what can go in the bins and what can't.
I even had it when I first started, I had a car battery. So I went to lift it, and of course it didn't move. I opened it and I thought, oh, you're kidding me, you know? So I just left it there for like a couple of months, and then someone finally wised up, took the battery out and started using it properly. That was that.
Some Aucklanders we spoke to are welcoming the new scheme, saying it's a good way to use waste that would otherwise go to landfill.
I was a reluctant starter, but I've got into the swing of it now, and I religiously put my bin out every week.
I think it's an awesome incentive, so big fan. Otherwise, all that used to just go into our normal waste. What we're finding now is we hardly have any normal waste.
Others are less than impressed with the idea.
Don't like the idea of having dirty stuff hanging around the house for a week.
In the past, the council have had the system, user pays, and if you wanted a service, you paid for it. Now they're imposing it upon us, and we don't want it.
Don't want rats and stuff coming around. I've heard that there's rats and stuff coming around if you put the bins out.
Parul Sud, manager of waste solutions at Auckland Council, has some tips and tricks to help get around some of these issues.
If you've got food scraps, maybe keep them frozen in your fridge. Put them out when you put it out for collection. The bin is designed to lock, so if you put the handle up, it actually locks the lid. So anything getting into it is a bit hard.
She says for people who already compost, there are still some things they might want to put in the little green bin, such as meat scraps. And for people who use a garbage disposal, Parul says curbside collection is a more sustainable option. Whether or not you use the new bin, there's a $77.20 annual charge for it through rates, which Parul reckons is good value for money.
And keeping in mind it's a every week service, so you can put your material out every week. I think that's quite cheap.
Glenn Marshall believes that as time goes on, more people will get on board with the scheme.
And I think getting into the children, they tend to be the drivers. Like, I've got friends that, got grandkids and so on, and they're going, Grandpa, you can't put that in there. And it's like, oh, I've just been told by a 5-year-old, okay. And that I think is the future, because it's what we're doing now, they're going to benefit from, and guys like me aren't going to be here in 20 or 30 years, we'll say.
Yeah, sounds like our office when we get instructions about where the soft plastics go. Matthew Tunison. Lots of feedback coming in. Let's start with bowel cancer. This person says, research. Why has more research not been done on bowel and other cancers instead of constantly being the ambulance at the bottom of the hill? Max from Dunedin's got in touch, says, I never thought I'd say it, but for once I agree with David Seymour regarding his comments on increasing bowel screening. The next government should focus on saving, in this case, saving lives, says Max. Another says, screen for bowel cancer, yes, first prevent, as it is far more effective. We know what causes it, and they point to dietary factors and encouraging people to eat more fresh fruit and vegetables, and that is from a lifestyle medicine doctor here in Auckland. On the subject of Weet-Bix, now this is the warehouse has complained to the Commerce Commission about Sanitarium. They say they're getting cut off on the Weet-Bix supply because there's a bit of a shortage. This listener says, so Kiwi kids are only Weet-Bix kids if their parents want to pay 33% more for breakfast. Interesting that Sanitarium is stopping selling to a Kiwi company but would rather supply an overpriced Aussie grocer. Aren't they a charity who don't pay tax and receive the wage subsidy? Could be time to shop around for a change of brand. Another says cutting off the warehouse's Weet-Bix supply. Curious that a religious charity whose apparent focus is nutrition appears to be choosing profit over affordable nutrition.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Tēnā tātou, ko Ivy Ashton tēnei. A Bowel Cancer charity expects the party that wins the election to move quickly to reduce the age of screening for the disease after making promises in the latest debate. Labour and National have said they'll match Australia by introducing screening from the age of 45. Bowel Cancer New Zealand chair Stephen Corbett told Checkpoint that New Zealand has the highest rate of the disease in the world, with 1,200 people dying every year. He says those figures needn't be so bad.
We would like to see a work plan and funding behind that work plan to make sure that this is implemented promptly. This is a real problem for New Zealand, and it's not necessary. 90% of bowel cancers are curable if they're caught early.
Stephen Corbett expects the next government to implement the lower screening age within their first term. The Auckland Mayor says the sinkhole pumping sewage into the Waitemata Harbour is a result of many years of neglect. It will take 10 days to bypass a 13-metre deep sinkhole that opened up in Parnell yesterday in one of Auckland's main sewer lines, and much longer again to fix the problem. It's the third sinkhole in the city in recent months. Mayor Wayne Brown says the pipeline network in Auckland needs to be brought into the 21st century. He says the council wants more financial autonomy to be able to upgrade the underground network. And further south, Eastbourne in Lower Hutt has been without water since lunchtime because of an outage. The entire suburb is dry while Wellington Water fixes a burst pipe on Marine Drive. Mark Nicholas from ESSC Eats says he couldn't open this evening because without running water it's unhygienic. But he's not too concerned about the loss of income, saying he was looking forward to a night off. Wellington Water says it's made good progress and was hoping to turn the water on about now. Health officials say some people are getting cryptosporidiosis from people they live or work with as the Queenstown outbreak grows to 45. Te Whatu Order says there are a further 17 probable cases of the gastrobug and 3 under investigation. A boil water notice remains in place while the council and other authorities work to find the source. The health agency says people must wash their hands thoroughly to stop the bug's spread, and if someone is sick, make sure all household surfaces are regularly cleaned with a product that contains hydrogen peroxide. Donald Trump has once again chosen to skip the US Republican Party's presidential debate, the second before next year's election. Instead, Mr. Trump's chosen to campaign in Michigan, a key battleground state for 2024. He's turned up at the picket line of striking car workers in Detroit, a day after President Joe Biden did, telling them he is their real ally.
I want a future that protects American labor, not foreign labor. A future that puts American dreams over foreign profits, and a future that raises American wages, that strengthens American industry, that builds national pride, and that defends this country's dignity, not squanders it all to build up foreign countries that hate us.
One of the other 7 Republican hopefuls, Chris Christie, called Mr. Trump Donald Duck for avoiding the debate. An investigation into a double fatal crash near Kirikiri in 2018 had serious deficiencies, the Independent Police Conduct Authority has found. The head-on crash between a station wagon and a van at Bulls Gorge on State Highway 10 also left 2 people seriously injured and led to multiple charges against the American tourist driving the van. The IPCA found the crash investigation wasn't sufficiently thorough and relied too heavily on a statement by one of the surviving station wagon passengers blaming the driver of the van. When the passenger later changed his statement, the judge dismissed all charges against the tourist. The IPCA also found the initial decision to charge the tourist was justified, but a later decision to upgrade the charges wasn't backed up by evidence. A major study has found that 1 in 6 wildlife species in the UK is at risk of becoming extinct. The State of Nature report assessed 10,000 different mammals, plants, insects, birds and amphibians. It's been put together by conservation groups, government agencies and academics. They say animals such as the turtle dove and the hazel dormouse are among those facing an uncertain future. And scientists at Europe's Particle Physics Centre, CERN, in Switzerland, have made a key discovery about how the elusive substance antimatter responds to gravity. It's hoped that discovering the differences and similarities between matter and antimatter can explain how the universe arose. The BBC's Palab Ghosh reports.
Antimatter is the opposite of matter, which makes up the material of nearly everything in the world and in space. So some theories speculated that it might fall upwards instead of down. To test this, researchers mass-produced antimatter atoms, trapped them and dropped them. They found, to some disappointment, that they fell downwards. But they're continuing with their research to find out whether antimatter falls at a slightly different rate. If so, it could shed light on how the universe came into being.
That's the news.
This Saturday morning, Trent Dalton has a new novel about the shimmering underbelly of his hometown, Brisbane. His faith in the power of empathy is undimmed. Speaking of which, Nicola Joyce of Irish-New Zealand band Grada has contributed to the Empathy Book for Ireland. And Trent Dalton's novel is about the homeless, and they are US author Jennifer Egan's urgent concern too. Connections. Call Kim Hillo. Join me Saturday morning from 8 on RNZ National.
You're back on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. Northland to Taumarunui, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Showers, some heavy, becoming isolated overnight, but rain for Taupo and Waitomo tomorrow evening. Taranaki, Whanganui, Taihape and Manawatu, a few showers, turning to rain tomorrow evening. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers today, then becoming fine tomorrow morning. Horowhenua to Wellington, also for Wairarapa. Cloudy periods and isolated showers, rain tonight, clearing early tomorrow, but showers returning north of Wellington City tomorrow afternoon. For Marlborough and Canterbury, a period of rain spreading north late this afternoon and evening with thunderstorms and hail about Canterbury. High cloud tomorrow with a few evening showers in Canterbury. For the remainder of the South Island, scattered showers, some heavy with hail tomorrow and snow lowering to 500 metres in Southland tomorrow night. And for Kohu, Chatham Islands, rain easing tomorrow. It is 7 minutes past 6. Our next news headlines are at 6:30.
Nā mihi Evie, no mai, hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Auckland's Mount Albert electorate has always been held by Labour. It's produced party leaders and prime ministers like Helen Clark and Jacinda Ardern. But this year, National is running a strong ground campaign and the Green Party is hoping to improve its chances off the back of its victory in the neighbouring electorate of Auckland Central. Our reporter Tom Taylor met the candidates.
The Mount Albert electorate spans from the bungalows of Westmere to the hillside of Wairaka, the windsurfers of Point Chevalier to the car yards of Arch Hill. At the Greyland shops, Nick is quick to tell me what he thinks the big election issues are.
Public transport would be a big thing, and honesty on the behalf of the parties and the people within them.
Over on Mount Albert's main strip, this shopkeeper says safety needs to be the number one focus.
I don't believe who gonna reduce the crime rate. Need to be strict rules about the crime, otherwise business is going to shut down.
Up the road in Kingsland, Uppy says housing tops the list.
The young fellas, they can afford to move in or just to make a start. It's too expensive. Right?
Off to see the candidates, and Labour's Helen White is proving popular, albeit among a crowd still a way off voting age.
Big as a horse. Big as a horse. And what about that one?
Mount Albert's one of the electorates with the lowest rates of home ownership, 29% at the last count. White's concerned about how rental instability may affect these young ones.
If you have really insecure rental, then children move all the time when they're little, and that's terrible in terms of what it does to their education and even their well-being.
White narrowly lost out to Green MP Chloe Swarbrick in Auckland Central 3 years ago. But she's now looking forward to standing in her home of more than 30 years. And after a trilogy of Mount Albert MPs, Helen Clark, David Shearer and Jacinda Ardern spent much of their energy leading the Labour Party, she says her list ranking of 47 could play in her favour.
We've had a lot of high-profile people who've been very, very busy, and they've been amazing, but I think it's time for someone to give this electorate the local attention that it needs.
Mount Albert's been a Labour seat since its inception in 1946, so it might seem like whites to lose. But National's Melissa Lee can sense a mood of change.
When you door knock, traditional Labour people will always vote Labour, but I think I sense it's a change. I'm not quite sure if it'll come to National, but there are a lot of undecided voters, and that's who I'm actually trying to talk to appeal to them.
She's number 13 on National's list and has run in Mount Albert since 2009, when Helen Clark resigned, forcing a by-election. Melissa Lee says more houses need to be built, but also says lots of houses are sitting empty.
A lot of landlords, when they have so many regulations put on them, sometimes they actually find that it's just not worth putting their houses up for rental, especially when they can't actually exit bad tenants who actually damage their properties and do drugs and all that sort of stuff.
She'd push to make it easier for landlords to evict unruly tenants. Ricardo Menendez March, number 8 on the Greens list, but a distant third in the contest for the Maunga Keke seat 3 years ago, is looking to give Helen White a run for her money.
We're running our biggest campaign ever to deliver progressive change for the community of Mount Albert and to win the seat, as well as increasing our party vote.
Housing's his focus too. He says the electorate needs more intensification, but it needs to be done well, especially after Mount Albert homes and businesses were flooded earlier in the year.
This is one of our key campaign priorities, having a fund that can enable central government to work with communities, with local government as well, to upgrade our infrastructure so that our cities are able to better sponge up water when there's extreme weather events.
Other candidates for Mount Albert include ACT's Ollie Murphy and TOP's Kiara Swords.
The National Library of New Zealand is hoping to connect Pasifika youth to their Polynesian voyaging history with the launch of an interactive education program in Wellington. As part of this, a 4-metre-long replica of a traditional double-hulled Vaka has been created in partnership with the Victoria University of Design and Innovation. Tiana Haxton went along to the opening ceremony.
Whakaura is the name of the Vaka. It took 18 months to design and construct, based off digital models of Cook Island's Whakateo o Tonga. The twin hulls were 3D printed with recycled and ocean plastics, and for the rest of the construction, the team used reclaimed materials to promote an eco-friendly process. The library's senior education specialist, Te Reora Crane, says it is an important tool to share the rich Indigenous knowledge of our ancestors with the next generation.
So there's a whole world of science and engineering which should be inspirational along with the stories to our young people to say, well, if that's my heritage, if I'm connected to that, then what should I do with my life?
The vessel has been created as an educational tool to be taken into schools around New Zealand as a part of an immersive package for youth to connect to the moana.
That's the privilege that we have of being storytellers and sharing that stuff, is to inspire, to agitate our young people to think about, well, if this is in my backdrop, how will I write the next chapter? If we can't inspire our young people about their culture and their heritage, why would they care? Why would they, as the future guardians of that knowledge and cultural practices and science, why would they care about taking that forward?
This message resonates deeply with one of the students who's been involved in the project over the past 10 months. Lawrence Reed says he dealt with racism growing up, causing him to feel ashamed and disconnected from his Samoan heritage.
Yeah, it's really opened my eyes to how amazing we are as Pacific people and what we've accomplished, and no one can take that away from us. And so it's almost like our birthright to be proud, because these things have already been done and it's up to us to build on that.
Being involved in the research, design and creation of Whakaura, Reed discovered great pride for his culture in the stories of Polynesian voyaging.
It's really important for the young people to understand who they are and where they came from. For now, I'm really proud of what we've created.
Whakaura will be transported to Auckland next week, where school outreach programs will begin.
Some of your feedback now, a lot of you getting in touch about the state of the pipes in Auckland. Craig says, let's be clear, the wastewater infrastructure is a local government issue. Many of these same councils with wastewater pollution issues are the ones that fought tooth and nail against Three Waters. That's also on their ratepayers who didn't speak up. The councils need to be fined for every hour of every day that they pollute our harbours, says Craig. On bowel cancer screening, and this is the promises that Chris and Christopher made last night at the leaders' debate to lower the age for access to free bowel cancer screening. Stuart's got in touch to say the earlier a cancer is detected, the more likely there is a cure and the cheaper the cure is. In other words, if it's detected earlier, it's cheaper for the health system to treat. Thank you for your feedback. 2101 on text. It is 6:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Police in the Indonesian capital Jakarta have launched a sexual morality crackdown, bringing the country's strict anti-pornography laws back into focus. This month, they've raided an alleged porn production studio, but some of the accused say they'll keep making adult films despite the risks. The ABC's Bill Birtles reports.
On a blazing hot Jakarta morning, a young woman emerges through a media scrum to report herself to police. 25-year-old Siskei is arguably Indonesia's best-known adult performer in a country where porn is banned and people face up to 12 years in jail for making it.
Whatever job we choose to do, there's always some risks involved. My risks are higher because porn is illegal in Indonesia. But it's my choice. I won't lie, the money plays a big role. But I do it because I've always liked to show off my body. I have a great body, and while it still looks good, I'll take the risks.
Polisi telah memeriksa 13 dari 16 pemeran film porno.
Siskei is among 5 suspects under investigation after police raided a house in Jakarta that allegedly housed a porn studio. She and the other performers say they were duped by the director and pressured to film scenes that weren't in the original script. Although that's raised some doubts, given her history of uploading explicit content to overseas-based sites. Siskei has already once been jailed for making porn in Indonesia, yet she and a small group of other performers continue to do it.
Porn is illegal, but for Indonesians, when the government says don't do it, they will continue to seek it.
Since a sweeping anti-pornography law was passed with the backing of Islamic political parties 15 years ago, police have sporadically enforced it. Davi Ramawati is a Jakarta-based sociologist.
Parents, of course, have an obligation to educate young people about sex so that young people don't just learn it from porn. But for adults, they are choosing to access it. They are aware of the consequences.
The government last year passed an expanded adultery law banning all sex outside of marriage that will come into force in just over 2 years' time. And despite the notoriety helping to drive her fame, Siskei says it's not just police she has to worry about.
I'm not worried about condemnation or the hateful comments I receive, but I am concerned about my family. They're sad every time they hear the news and the journalists mention my name. They make me sound like I'm on the run, like I'm a terrorist or a murderer.
She's again been all over the news with this latest case, but says the intense attention shows she still has a bright future making more content, so long as she can avoid jail.
More than a third of ethnic Armenians living in the disputed territory of Nagorno-Karabakh have now fled to Armenia. It comes after Azerbaijan took full control of the region last week. The Azerbaijan government has promised to respect the rights of all ethnic Armenians, but people continue to leave. The BBC's Sarah Rainsford reports.
Just walking down this street and it is lined with cars and every one of them has a family from Nagorno-Karabakh. There's a woman here, heavily pregnant, and she's just leaning against the wall and crying. There's a car right next to me here with bundles of blankets piled on the roof rack and a big bike on top of it. The granny's in the back. Looks like she's trying to make a cup of tea. Здрасте, я из BBC. А вы откуда приехали? Да, сегодня?
We are from Stepanakert. The road out was tough, very stressful. It took 2 days.
there was a really big queue. The whole of Karabakh is leaving. I cry now all day long. We left everything, 4 houses, everything.
Not far from the beautiful Armenian church at the foot of the mountain is the main reception point for refugees here in Goris. And there are crowds of people everywhere. There are minibuses standing by ready to take people to different corners of this country. It's all quite calm, but the mood here is depressed. These are people who are leaving behind everything and heading into the unknown.
We are students in high school, and we help people because they are coming, and we are cutting, as you see, fruits, sweet bread, coffee for people. There is no stop.
So you live here in Goris and you saw what was happening and you wanted to help.
Yes.
How do you feel about seeing all these people coming from Karabakh?
We just help. We don't know what to do. We don't know what to do.
I've been trying to speak to some of the men here who fought to defend Nagorno-Karabakh, but nobody wants to comment publicly. One of them just said that he wouldn't speak because after all of these years fighting to defend the right to be in that enclave, they'd lost. And he said he was ashamed of that.
There are concerns that Australia's new multi-million-dollar fire danger system might be overly sensitive and unnecessarily alarming the public. Experts say it's miscalculating the likelihood of bushfires and potentially hampering hazard reduction operations. The ABC's Jemima Burt reports.
In September last year, a new fire danger rating system was introduced across the nation with 4 levels: moderate, high, extreme and catastrophic.
So we've used our knowledge to change the fire danger rating system. It's now simpler and clearer, and it could save your life.
The warnings were developed by state and federal governments and appear on colour-coded road signs, as well as being shared on social media, radio, television and other outlets. The new system was a recommendation from the Bushfire Royal Commission, held after the Black Summer fires.
It's a gross over-prediction of the fire danger.
Until 2019, Andrew Sturgis ran the Predictive Services Unit at Queensland Fire and Emergency Services. He says the new system that's used to generate the warnings requires complex vegetation, fuel and atmospheric data that's not available everywhere.
We don't have those refined inputs. We don't have the quality of inputs that we need to get really confident fire danger ratings out of the new system.
And he believes gaps in the data are affecting the results.
We are over-forecasting the fire danger rating. We are seeing catastrophic and extreme fire danger rating under conditions that it's not supported by the data and the science.
Earlier this month, Queensland authorities declared catastrophic conditions for the Darling Downs and Granite Belt in the state's south. Gundawindi Mayor Lawrence Springborg says the predicted conditions never eventuated.
But that day, of course, we started with some showers in the morning, which did dry out. Certainly, they weren't the most serious fire conditions that I would have witnessed in my time.
Andrew Sturgis agrees.
The largest area that I've ever seen was declared catastrophic. Now, the forecast wasn't great, but it was a long way short of catastrophic.
A spokesperson for Queensland Fire and Emergency Services says the issue that led to the over-forecasting earlier this month has been resolved, and that it continues to work closely with other jurisdictions in the ongoing refinement and enhancement of the fire danger rating system.
Australia's government is planning major changes to privacy laws in an effort to prevent another series of hacks that affected millions of Medibank and Optus customers. Small businesses could be required to comply with the Privacy Act for the first time, giving customers greater protection of their data. The ABC's Angus Randall reports.
Marjorie from regional Victoria was unlucky enough to have her data hacked 3 times. She'd been a customer of Optus, Medibank and financial services company Latitude.
I got an email from Vic Road saying your details have been released by the Optus thing and we're going to replace your licence. How did that happen? I haven't been with Optus for well over 12 years.
Despite not being with Optus for all that time, the company still had highly sensitive information.
I just thought it was amazing that once you cease being a customer of that organisation, that they don't automatically delete you from the system. It should be just automatic.
Change is on the way. Attorney General Mark Dreyfus has responded to a review of the Privacy Act launched by the previous coalition government. He's agreed to 38 of the 116 recommendations and supports more consultation on most of the other suggestions. It could see companies given a deadline for how long they can hold someone's data and allow former customers to ask to be removed. Dr. Catherine Kemp is from the University of New South Wales Law School.
A right to erasure is really important in offsetting the serious imbalances in power that exist between consumers and organisations who collect their data. And it can also have good side effects. For example, it encourages companies to collect only the information they need and to earn consumers' trust.
Small businesses could be massively affected by some of the suggested changes. Businesses with a turnover of less than $3 million a year are currently exempt from the Privacy Act. So the local pharmacy or shop that has your details may not be required to meet any standard of data protection or tell you if there's been a breach. The Attorney-General plans to transition small businesses into the Privacy Act. Dr. Catherine Kemp says it's vital to have protection across the board.
We can't have that kind of gaping hole in protecting consumers' data when poor privacy protections by small businesses can cause just as much harm as breaches by large businesses.
Most of us have found ourselves having to make excuses to get out of a social engagement. But an Australian man has taken this form of deceit to a whole new level. In order to get out of spending New Year's Eve with his partner, he fabricated the most unlikely tale ever. In the end, it got him arrested and cost him thousands. The BBC's Rebecca Wood reports.
What about my car's broken down? Or I've got food poisoning, or I'm washing my hair. But no, not for poor Yera from Wollongong. In an effort to be elsewhere on New Year's Eve, he went for the excuse, I've been kidnapped. Leaving home just before the stroke of midnight on December the 31st, he told his partner he was going to meet his so-called financial guy. Instead, he was off to see his lover. To buy time, they sent a text message to Yera's partner saying he was being held hostage but would be released in the morning. According to local media, he later told police it was by a group of unknown Middle Eastern men. Fearing for his welfare, his partner contacted the emergency services. But thousands of dollars of taxpayers' money and 200 hours of police work later, the truth was revealed and he was arrested. A court has handed him a 3-year community correction order and told him to pay $10,000 to the police in compensation. Magistrate Michael Ong said his abhorrent behaviour was motivated by the least compelling reason that he's ever come across.
What a whopper of a porky. OK, fans of a wee dram are getting a chance to bid for what is believed by some connoisseurs to be the oldest Scotch whisky in existence. 24 bottles of the stuff found in a castle cellar dating back almost 2 centuries are being put up for auction. This batch may have even passed the lips of Queen Victoria. The BBC's Bernadette Kehoe reports.
It was an unassuming hiding place for the rarest of tipples, tucked away at the back of a shelf behind a cellar door at Blair Castle in Perthshire. Fortunately, the Victorian whisky distillers were meticulous in leaving a plaque, indicating it was produced in 1833. It may even have been sipped by Queen Victoria, who visited the castle a decade later, staying 3 weeks and developing, it said, a taste for a whisky and honey concoction. The current resident trustee, Bertie Troughton, couldn't believe what he'd stumbled across.
On the shelf were these magical collection of dusty, kind of greeny blue bottles with this little shelf sign saying Blair Castle Whisky, cast 1833, bottled 1841. So I did what anyone would do in my situation, I think, and opened a bottle. I thought we had to immediately check that it was, still as good as the label suggested.
Scientific testing proved the liquor's age. An expert taster described it as having medicinal characteristics without any pronounced peat smoke. 24 bottles will be sold individually in November. Others will be kept back to go on display at a new exhibition about the history of whisky distilling at the castle.
Before we go, a listener's got in touch to say we need to pause for a moment to recognise those people literally in the poo cleaning up that pipe in Parnell. Yes, we recognise your work. Now, what's happening tomorrow morning, you may ask? Ko te kaupapa tuatahi pōpō, and tomorrow from 5 a.m. First Up has an exclusive interview with New Zealand Rugby CEO Mark Robinson dissecting the current state of the game in Aotearoa and abroad. Do tune in then, and we'll catch you a little later in the day.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening, I'm Evie Ashton. Labour and National have promised to match Australia by introducing bowel cancer screening from the age of 45. Bowel Cancer New Zealand Chair Stephen Corbett told Checkpoint this country has the highest rate of the disease in the world. Sewage will continue entering Auckland's Waitemata Harbour for some time after a pipe collapsed, opening a 13-metre deep sinkhole. It will take 10 days to bypass the faults in Parnell and much longer again to fix the problem. Police say they'll remain at Parliament overnight while people who took part in today's protest march leave the capital. And Donald Trump has been criticised for avoiding the latest televised debate for the US Republican presidential nomination. Rival candidate Chris Christie is calling him Donald Duck. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tomorrow after 1 p.m, soul and R&B influenced pop with the band Leisure performing on New Zealand Live. Gretchen Lowe has a recipe for Jamaican jerk fish. And the spiky leaves and flowers of our critter of the week, golden speargrass, are famous for their power to draw blood. But if you can get past the spike, you'll be rewarded with one of the most sought-after scents